Why hello YouTube! Greetings from the LazyEyebrowReviewer to my final review for Season 3 of the LazyEyebrowReviewer. And before I move, this review is coming for a few reasons. One, because I'm annoyed at myself for no review last month, and B, because I just got these figures and I really didn't want to wait till the fall to review them. And you'll probably see why by the end of this review. So, on with the review. And it is none other than Combiner Wars Stunticons! Sans Blackjack. The first of the Combiner Wars reviews on this channel, unless you're counting Jetfire, which I don't because that was technically the Generations line. So where do we start with this 5-part team? Well, how about the team in general? As a team of Hasbro toys, I don't think they look half bad. But that being said, they also don't look half good either. Something about them seems off in terms of scaling and design, like they all look like they came from different eras in a sense. In no way is this a bad thing, but it just doesn't look right to me. But I guess it suits up with the personalities of these characters since they're all so vastly different. So let's break them up and see how they stack up individually, starting with the team leader, Motormaster. The first thing you'll notice about this figure, if you're even slightly familiar with the G1 counterpart, is that this figure has no trailer. This is a point of contention for some, and others have no issue with it. Me personally, I'm right down the middle. The lack of trailer means that the truck gets to be big enough to be plausible as a Voyager-sized bot mode without towering over everyone else. However, this also means that his alt mode ends up looking nothing like it should, but we will get to that later. As for the truck itself, I think it's alright if nothing more negative is said about it than it's a little plain. Kibble-wise, this thing isn't flawless, but it's pretty good. Menasor's crotch plate sits rather nicely, and you don't really notice it if you don't look at it too hard. Rims are left black, which I've never seen a truck with. And there's a spot for signal and brake lights, although it's left unpainted. Not really anything surprising though, considering this is Hasbro, and they rarely ever go that extra mile that Takara does to make their figures look stellar, considering they're convinced that only small children buy their figures, and they need to be brightly colored with no detail. That's all I can say about it really. The truck itself is lacking a ton of detail where it probably could have used it, but otherwise it's a fairly convincing cab-over truck. It's nothing like the Kenilworth the 80s traded us to, but I'm not faulting it for updating the vehicle mode. As for weapon storage, Motormaster comes with a giant sword from Menasor that can split into two. This can then be put together and stored in the horseshoe at the back of the truck, or, if you lift up the crotch flap, can be more securely stored on the back. I care for neither of these options, so I leave the sword aside. For vehicular size comparison, here's G1 Prime, or Magnus, Masterpiece Optimus Prime, and Fans Project Diesel. Now moving on to the Stunticons. Here's Deluxe Breakdown, with some super high exposure going on my camera. Maybe I should change my review background to gray or something. Like Rocket Punch Army, or TJ whatever his name is, or something. I don't know, something to keep in mind for when I move. Anyway, Breakdown. Breakdown is looking very G1-esque, much in the same way the Classics line gave us. He looks somewhat like a Lamborghini Diablo to me, with a modern-style Lamborghini headlights. I'm quite liking the style, and the paint scheme is great. Very much nailed the character it was based on. The white isn't totally white, more of a creamy color, but it doesn't look awful in vehicle mode. Robot mode is a different story, but I'll get into that later. His vehicle weapon storage includes his handfoot, which Hasbro made for us to pretend like it's some sort of intake or something, much in the style of Sunstreaker. The problem is that it looks so daft that nobody over the age of 4 would actually believe that this is an intake manifold. The other thing he gets is the side-mounted sword gun. Is that really a thing? Whatever. I can only see this being useful to vandalize other Autobots. Autobots, this is Prime. Breakdown has just come and slashed my tires while I was napping. Someone dispatch Hoist. Quite frankly, the weapon mounts on the cars all suck, but I'm totally still going to cover them. Next up is Dead End. Dead End gets to be a Ferrari 458 Italia-inspired vehicle for some reason, despite clearly being a Porsche in his G1 incarnation. This is in fact supposed to be Wild Rider's alt mode, who they're now calling Breakneck, but they used it instead for Dead End, and made Breakneck the exclusive you need to hunt down. Same thing happened to Fireflight, who was supposed to be an F4 Phantom, but ends up with Slingshot's Harrier alt mode, and Slingshot gets to be the one you get to hunt down. I really don't understand this move, but whatever. Dead end here, flat out sucks. The alt mode is not bad, I'll give it that, but this really doesn't work for dead end. And what's with people making dead end a Ferrari lately anyhow? Anyway, the alt mode is fine. There's not much I can really rag on it for, nor do I wish to, because quite frankly, I love the 458. But why exactly does this maroon not continue along the doors? Like, that middle bit isn't even the same shade of gray. Why does dead end only get one solid gold stripe along the hood and roof? Why exactly do these gray bits rear their ugly head along the bumper? As far as design choices, this guy really missed the mark, and it's really sad too, because from what I've seen of Breakneck, this mold really works for him. Yes, Breakneck has that one red thing along his door, but the rest of it just really works in my opinion. For weapon storage, we get the hand foot on top looking like... You know what? I can't even tell, it just looks so derpy. The other thing he gets is this sort of exhaust pipe thing, side-mounted. Now, normally I love it when a weapon becomes an exhaust pipe, but the thing about doing that is that you just can't throw a pipe onto a car and say, "Look, it's an exhaust pipe!" The pipe usually has to connect with, I don't know, an engine? And the 458, and well, all the car figures here have rear-mounted engines. Of course, this doesn't include off-road. Normally, you can get away with this if you stick the pipe under the vehicle, because how often does one get to see the underside of a vehicle in real life? But dead end or Breakneck? Heck no! They have their pipe sticking out in the middle of nowhere, for no rhyme or reason. This alt mode just irritates me so much. On to the next guy, Off-Road. Off-Road is new to this team and sports Wild Riders colors in vehicle mode. Quite frankly, I love this truck. Although to be honest, it just doesn't strike me as a Stunticon. I think it looks the part of a Decepticon, sure, but Stunticon? Nah, not really. Overall, though, I think the truck mode looks great, save for the back where there's this junk that's probably trying to pass off as mud flaps or something. It's really feet in robot mode, but in truck mode it can take a hike. Otherwise, this thing looks great. There's no doubt in my mind that this could seriously use some taillight detail, though. As for scale-wise, I think it does a pretty good job. At least, I believe that these two would be realistically scaled if I saw them in the real world. He's definitely got the height down for sure. Honestly, though, I think Hoist and Trailbreaker could have used retools of this mold. Sure, the transformations would have been way off in the sense that the hood wouldn't be the chest, but I think I could honestly live with that if it meant a better alt mode. That is just my opinion, though. For weapon storage, Off-Road is even the only Stunticon member whose hand-foot doesn't look over-the-top stupid. Don't get me wrong, it still looks dumb, but at least it could have maybe passed for an ill-fitting canopy. The other weapon he gets is his axe. It just plugs into the side, and that's about it. It's more storage than trying to be anything, and I guess whatever. The thing that really gets me with this guy's weapons, though, is that hand-foot has exhaust tips. Well, this would be great if, it would actually mount like exhaust tips. As is, the only way they mount is for the hand-foot to be where the axe is, which doesn't work in the slightest, or on top of the cab, which can only work if the exhaust pipes face towards the cab. This guy really wasn't well thought out. That being said, I'm actually looking forward to the first aid retool whenever it shows its head in Canada. I like this guy that much. Moving on to the last of our bunch, Dragstrip. Dragstrip is modeled after modernish era F1 car, which is exactly what G1 Dragstrip was. I know a lot of people complain that Dragstrip doesn't have 6 wheels anymore, and people keep forgetting to add that into later incarnations, but I honestly don't mind. Reason being that the F1 car that G1 Dragstrip was based off of really did have 6 wheels, but was only in service for a short time, as the people who decide what goes on in an F1 race decided that having more friction on the ground was an unfair advantage, and the rules were changed to make it specifically 4-wheeled Formula 1 race vehicles. If 6 wheels is your jam, then that's fine, but personally, the 4 wheels doesn't bother me all that much. So back to this Dragstrip figure. I think the mold is nice. That's probably the end of my compliments, though. The color scheme, on the other hand, leaves me wondering what the aesthetic team was thinking. The yellow, yeah, that's top-notch. But then we get to this reddish, purplish, magenta-ish, burgundy-ish color. Now, I know I'm a guy, and on average, I see way less colors and shades than my wife, and for some reason, I guess that's just how guys are built. I don't know. Long story short, I asked my wife to identify this color, and the previous statement of issues is what we came up with. It's just such a bizarre color that really doesn't suit the nature of Dragstrip. As far as the mold goes, though, I constantly get the rear wheels popping off while fiddling with it, and it's kind of bothersome. Way to go, QC guy. You had one job. Okay, weapon accessories. We get this. Yeah. And then we get this knife gun that has an angled handle that's stupid for a few reasons, one of which being what you're looking at right now. Either Dragstrip has to be really precise when he drives by people's tires, like Breakdown, or else this happens.
Look, I don't care if Hoish is on his day off. I have 3 flat tires. Look, Ratchet, I'm not walking the 6 kilometers back to base because Breakdown is being a jerk. Well, I don't care if it's a 5-minute walk for us and it's a nice day. Get Hoist to... Whoa!
So that's Dragstrip. He sucks and I wanted so much to like him. If only for the fact that he would actually be an F1 car and not some road-worthy F1 wannabe like Downforce here. And it's not like the mole is bringing it down either. It's this idiotic purpley color that can't make up its mind what it wants to be when it grows up. Like, look at Downforce's paint. That is a nice red. Why couldn't we have small amounts of that on Dragstrip? You know, less is more sort of deal. In short, I really wanted to love this set of vehicles because they were affordable. It's a combiner for $120, which isn't bad. And it's Hashtag. They've made some good stuff before, like Jetfire and some of the classics lines from 5 years ago. I also wanted to love this set because they are in better scale and roll-up mode to what I'm going for than the Fans Project kit. Like, these guys could compete with G1, but I'll save that for another review. Downforce is better. I can't really compare Wild Rider and Off-Road, but I really do love Off-Road. Breakdown and Car Crash are equally good in my opinion, but I think I enjoy Breakdown a tad more in vehicle mode. And Dead End can take a hike, because Last Chance nails it out of the park. If one of them was a Porsche, that would make things a bit different and even better for me. But, oh well. So that's my take on vehicles. Breakdown is great, Dragstrip sucks, Off-Road is awesome, and I really don't like Dead End, but he's certainly not the worst member in my opinion. And lastly, Motormaster is pretty decent. Do they fare better than the third-party counterparts on vehicles alone? Well, for the price? Yeah, I'd say so. Sure, the Motor Squad might look a tad better in most ways, but certainly not 5 times the cost better. But this is just one aspect, their vehicle modes. That's a pretty easy comparison to make. How do their bot modes fare out? Let's transform them and find out. For Menasor, fold down the side flaps and fold the air dam forward. Then, slip and rotate the front of the cab around like so. Next, flip around the head, straighten his arms out, and then fold his feet down. After that, straighten out his legs and straighten out his torso as his transformation has a bent at 90 degrees. Finally, place the butt flap up and out of the way however you feel like placing it. On Breakdown, start by accordioning out the legs, fold up the windshield, followed by the whole front end of the car, fold down both the feet and rear spoiler. On the underside, detach the entire plating that makes up the undercarriage of the front end and fold it around to make a chest. And then spin around the head, fold up the shoulder hinges to lock in the chest, and then push down the arms, followed by folding the forearms from his biceps. Off-Road is essentially a carbon copy of all the area bots, just without wings. Start by untabbing the front of the vehicle and swinging it up and around towards the roof, followed by untabbing the arms from the back of the truck. Next, open the legs, swing them around on their double hinge, and close them back up. Originally, I wasn't a fan of this transformation, but I'll cover it more when we hit the area bots, as this method is heavily featured in their transformation. Finally, spin the head around. Dead End starts on the bottom of the car. Open the hinges that make up the bottom of the rear half of the car, then unfold the legs, and close the door like hinges back up. On the front, fold up the windshield, followed by the front end of the car. Fold down the chest plating in Breakdown fashion, and then fold up the shoulder hinges. Next, fold down the front of the car so the nose points up, but so that the front is still neatly tucked away. Fold up the hands and spin around the waist. Finally, Dragstrip. Start by untabbing the arms, then fold up the front of the car and spin it around and tab it into the air intake. Extend the legs, spin the waist, and then unfold the hands. Push up the shoulder joints, spin around the head, and then after all said and done, we have the Stunticon team in butt mode. Quite honestly, these guys don't look all that bad together at first glance. They're all the right colors. They look somewhat like a team. Motormaster towers over them in menacing Menasor-like proportions, but without being ridiculously big like their original G1 incarnations. I'd even go as far as to say they scale better in bot mode than Fans Project rendition of the team, in which we see that Diesel is taller than Motormaster, and the rest of Motor Squad is smaller than the rest of the Stunticons. Motormaster is rightfully chunky in an appropriate way when placed with the rest of his fellow team members. However, I find a lot of this awesomeness fades away into oblivion once you start singling them out. Motormaster as a whole doesn't look too bad in the big scheme of things, although that's not to say he has no flaws. His legs are clearly Optimus inspired with those rear truck wheels and shin vents. I understand why the legs aren't the front of the truck anymore, although I wouldn't mind some sort of faux molding to give that appearance, especially when these shin vents are located underneath the truck. I usually despise faux parts, such as Combiner Wars Optimus's windows. And, well, if this guy had faux cab as legs, it really wouldn't be an exception, but given the options, I'd rather that as opposed to Optimus shin vents. However, legs are really a minor concern. The major part that I can't stop looking at is this chest, because dang! Does this ever look good and suit Menasor? This chest is big and burly and right chunky in all the right ways. The shoulders too are great, but everything else beyond that kind of falls flat. The arms are a kibbly disaster of parts hanging here and there. The bicep is trying to hide the fact that a whole front of the truck is showing its pearly whites at you, and the hands are rather lackluster. The head too. While they nail the shape of the head down, I just really haven't gotten used to that face. It doesn't look anything close to menacing. It sorta looks like a samurai or a sumo wrestler trying their hardest not to be super sad about something. To be fair, Motor Squad couldn't nail the face either, so oh well, I guess. As for the back though, it's definitely a backpack for sure. But I like it. It looks streamlined and not at all like, look at me, I'm the folded up bits that the robot mode couldn't use from the vehicle. In short, Motormaster's okay. On to Breakdown, where I thought Motormaster was okay, Breakdown is hard to nail down where my opinion is of him. His legs are too bulky while simultaneously being super hollow in appearance, and his arms are way too thin. But I am totally digging this chest. It's entirely G1 inspired, and quite frankly, so is that head. Like, man, they nailed this head-torso combination out of the park, in terms of faithfulness to the original character and everything. Something I totally wish I could say for Car Crash. Although an issue that I've mentioned before with this guy is the off-white this guy is rocking out. Breakdown is supposed to be a nice white, with dark blue and red details. However, this white looks like Hasbro tried to make a white plastic, but someone at the factory took a leak into the vat of melted white, and then Hasbro wanted to keep everything uniform, so they got other employees to try their hands at defaming the whiteness of the plastic, and that's why we all have the color we see today. I mean, compared to Car Crash, there's a figure that got the white nailed down. Not a hint of bladder-relieved employees anywhere. And if third party isn't your jam, here's Air Raid, a character literally from the same shipment of the same wave. He gets fresh, pure white. Why couldn't this fella? Well, I guess in the words of Dead End,
who cares?
And speaking of which, Dead End! Dead End fares a little better than Breakdown in the sense that his arms are a lot bigger, which helps to flesh out the figure. I also love how they've layered the chest plate like they did on Breakdown so that Combiner Port is A, semi-hidden, and 2, it helps break up the solid red, giving the chest a more dynamic look. I quite like how they pulled this off. The legs also aren't terrible, which is nice. The head, on the other hand, just strikes me as odd. It's accurate in the way that he has a purple visor, but the shape of it just strikes me as a Bayformer, right down to the jagged nature of the mouth plate. I will admit, though, that this thing is way more faithful to the original design than the third-party counterpart. Dragstrip is sort of an oddball to me, and like I said previously, I really wanted to like this guy, and I kind of find it hard to. His proportions are alright, and I guess the Combiner Port is reminiscent of the G1's engine for a chest, but something about the lankiness of the figure really puts me off, and I've already covered how much I hate this reddish purple. As for his legs, I actually wondered why the aerial bots didn't do this when I first got them, much in the same way the classic Seekers did. Now, I know why. This leaves for some super short thighs and long calves, much akin to classic Astrotrain, and the nature of the legs always leaves the thighs collapsing inward while posing. The arms don't help either with the super nankiness they got going on. And the head, while the visor is accurate, it really feels like it's Transformers animated inspires, and I honestly didn't like that show or the design of its characters. So really, what chance does this guy have in my books? Which really sucks, because I honestly thought, what could be worse than this Kibley mess that was Downforce? I promise I'll get to a full review of the set in the fall, just bear with me. It's mostly filmed, I just didn't have time to finish it, he says while filming an entire review of Hasbro's kit. So on to the last guy who's just tagging along for the ride, Off-Road. I quite honestly love this guy, and it's really weird because he's the only one that isn't an official Stunticon. Is that weird? Like, shouldn't he be the guy I look at and go, well, you're clearly a repaint for a shameless cash grab? And he is. Sorta. First Aid gets to be this guy eventually, and I can already tell I'm going to love it. That being said, I'm not comparing it to Wild Rider because there really is no point. They are just that different. Anyway, I quite enjoy the legs. They look great, and I love how the suspension gets tucked into his knees for some extra detail. Does this make any logical sense in the practical world? Not really, but it still looks awesome. I love the paint scheme he's rocking out on his chest, as well as the teal, red, and gray paint scheme he's got going on overall as well. Not to mention the way his combiner port really shines in the light and stands out. I love the lime green nature of the face, and if I'm honest, it does kind of strike me as a TF Prime sort of inspired face. Is that what this team was going for? Did Hasbro really just take inspiration across multiple generations? We've got the G1 inspired, the Movieverse inspired, animated inspired, and now even TF Prime inspired. I have no idea what Motormaster is supposed to be though. Maybe IDW? I don't know. Either way, I'm personally not a fan if this was the case. Even if this wasn't the case, the only face I've really only enjoyed are breakdowns and off-roads. Both of which are, in my opinion, based off of series I've actually enjoyed. Personally, I like all my figures going for one particular aesthetic. Not from all walks of eras spanning 25 years to look like a discombobulated team. Anyway, enough rambling. On to weapons! Off-road gets an axe. It's a pretty nice axe at that. And I'll say now I'm not counting the hand feet. Those things aren't weapons, they're clearly appendages, and they don't even store in vehicle mode, so they can take a hike from this point on. I mean, heck, they just look overly gaudy and silly. They have weapons that they came with, and we're gonna cover those things. So Off-Road has an axe. Huzzah! He gets to be the lumberjack of the team, and he gets to cut firewood for those cold Cybertronian nights. Dragstrip gets his sword gun. It looks fine as a sword, but the moment you want it to be a rifle, then you start running into problems. See, the handle is angled, and because of this, anytime he tries to hold it, the handle for the sword bangs into his arm. I'm just going to go ahead and call this the G1 Optimus Gun Syndrome, because it's a stupid design oversight. Sure, he can hold it, but just barely. Unless you angle his hand in such a way that would cause Dragstrip to break his hand clean off if he had ever fired his gun. As a rifle, though, it doesn't look too bad. Dead End probably gets the stupidest weapon out of the entire lot. It's his exhaust pipe that has a handle to become a gun. What is wrong with this? Well, unless the physics of Looney Tunes applies and your target is directly above you, you're going to have some serious issues firing this thing. So if it isn't a gun, what sort of melee advantages does it have? Above all else, it's a blunt pipe, good for thwacking fellow team members with. That's basically it. And then Breakdown gets his sword gun as well. This is the only weapon that actually feasibly has two modes. Look! Gun, sword, gun, sword, gun, sword. Hours of fun! So that about does it for car weapons, the best of which being Breakdown and Off-Road. On to Motormaster. Menasor comes with a giant sword that can split into two. The first part of which is a gun for Motormaster, and the second part becomes a sword for Motormaster as well. Which is kinda sad if you think about it. Motormaster ends up getting more weapons than Menasor. Quite honestly, I think both of these things work out pretty well for Motormaster. His gun looks awesome, and his sword is in good proportion to his body. So there we have it. All the bot modes and their weapons. So far, Breakdown and Off-Road are coming out as my favorites because they just work out so well. But how about compared once again to the third-party counterpart? From cart mode, it's easy to say which you should get based on your wallet. But for bot and vehicle, it's a tough call. The size proportions are better, I find, in the official release, but the weapons I find to be just so much more practical. And although some of the heads of Motor Squad aren't entirely faithful in terms of eyes and visors and design and whatnot, I do like that they look unified in design. Tough call. If I had to decide from this point, I'd really have a hard time, to be honest. On to articulation. Motormaster has a ball-jointed head that can spin around and barely look up and down. Shoulders can spin, and using a super stiff ratchet joint, they can move out. I don't get why this has to be so stiff, though, as this joint doesn't end up supporting anything Menasor-wise, like Superion's shoulder did. Shoulders can also move forward if you detach the connection point, although I don't know why you'd want to do that. Arms can spin around and bend 90 degrees, which is sort of stupid considering that it's double jointed the other way and would probably look better if the arms were oriented the other way. Hand can also flip out, but that's to gain access to the connection port. Waist swivels, hips on a universal ratchet joint for forward, backward, and outward movement, knee bend, and thigh swivel. Pretty basic articulation, I must say. For size comparison, here's Diesel and Masterpiece Prime. Articulation is practically the same on the Carcons, so I'll go over them simultaneously. Head is on a ball joint for spinny action and up and down movement, although Dragstrip's head is so tight it really limits movement for me. Shoulders are ball jointed for outward movement and 360 degree spin. All of them have bicep swivel in some fashion or another, whether that means ball jointed elbow or actual bicep swivel. as well as a 90-degree arm. Although Breakdown, due to the transformation, gets 180 degrees. Dead End and Drag Strip both feature hands that can swivel in, although for some bizarre reason, Dead End has his hands on a super stiff ratchet. Why would you ever need that on this kind of joint? All of them have waist swivel and ball-jointed thighs with all sorts of hip action, thigh swivel, and a knee joint. The only one that has any sort of foot articulation whatsoever is Breakdown, and using that, he could pull off some super sneaky poses. So that's that, the Stunticons. Just the Stunticons. And so far, they're not all that bad. They're not overly great by any stretch, especially in the weapons department. But I'm not about to openly shun these 5 figures as they represent their respective characters decently enough and take some creative liberties along the way. So now on to the meat and potatoes of the review. Because who of us actually buy the Stunticons for the Stunticons? Who of us actually buy the Constructicons, or the Aerial Bots, or the Protectobots, or the Combaticons, just so we can have Transformer teams? If that were the case, we'd all buy Dinobots because we all love our sub-teams. Well, yes, some of us buy Dinobots and the Insecticons. We all buy these teams specifically for one reason: the Gestalt that these teams turn into. So let's get to that stage. First off, we need to take 2 vehicles and transform them back into cars, but with the front of the car removed and the connector port facing up. On the other 2, move the head and any chest plates up and out of the way, position the hands anywhere up and out of the way, and then stick the connector ports out. On Dead End, move that little pipe around for arm mode, and then tab the legs together. On the hand feet, pull out the fingers, fold it in half, then move the thumb down and then to whichever side you want that particular hand. Or leave the hand foot alone for a foot. Now Motormaster. Put the head away, spin around the forearms 180 degrees, next position the legs facing outwards, spin the torso around 180 degrees, and then fold up the arms until they click into the shoulders. If they don't click in, the shoulders might be misaligned, so you gotta fiddle with it until it all lines up. Then fold open the hands to gain access to the connector ports. And to be clear, the hands don't cover up the connector ports. All they do is move out of the way, which is lame. Bend out Motormaster's legs until he's practically squatting, and then fold up the flaps that are on Motormaster's legs and click them into place on the thigh, and then fold on the crotch plate. Open up the chest panel, move the section of the chest up so the head is now on top, and then position his horns accordingly. Finally, attach your vehicles to the connection points here, and here we have this abomination. This is where I really start to despise this figure. It's really hard to get this guy to stand straight, as usually one leg is longer than the other no matter what I do. One arm is currently longer than the other, and he's currently suffering from FOC Bruticus syndrome. There's a way to fix this though for Drag Strip. Simply remove the hand and move the spoiler up and reattach the hand, and then it looks a little better. But that doesn't really help Dead End, who only looks good in one orientation. And that's if you're looking at the side of the forearm. Otherwise, it looks like Menasor has been eating his Wheaties and it all went to his forearms. The feet and hands, too. While this isn't really a knock to Menasor, more to the Combiner Wars line itself, the hands are too big and the feet are too small. It just looks super out of place. This also makes him the shortest out of all my combiners. Here's a size comparison with M3, and there's just no comparison. Size aside for a second, Menasor's hands extend way past the crotch, making him look super disproportionate. The thigh gap is enormous. The car-to-thigh ratio is preposterous. And overall, he just looks super chunky, but in all the wrong ways. Back to size, though, he's a clear inch or so shorter. Maybe that's just because of the shoulder towers that Hasbro is lacking, but a third-party company can hook you up with. I don't know. But this combiner is just really lacking in that menacing look that Menasor is just known for. And then I find M3 over here pulls off wonderfully. Since we mentioned third party, I will point out there is a third party upgrade kit for all the combiners, hand and feet wise. They currently come in black, purple, and white, but I have the black version. So let's see if that improves things at all. Well, sorta. His stature has definitely improved, but now the leg to arm ratio is even more ridiculous. And where Menasor gets a sword, M3 gets a sword and a gun, both of which are made from parts of truck mode. Now, I know some of you are about to say, well, of course a third party is going to be better. Quit ragging on Menasor just because you have a bigger wallet. Well then, how about a comparison to fellow Combiner Wars Gestalt Superion? A much better figure in my opinion. The arms are longer, yes, but only because the thighs are Silverbolt's arms, which is a design choice I can totally get behind. Superion also doesn't require you to hunt down a sixth member to make the chest a little better. And only a little, because if you manage to find Blackjack, you're more likely to break the little guy than to have a chest plate the way Hasbro officially wants you to have him. Mind you, this is also the official Superion. The Superion with the hand and foot upgrades knocked this guy with the hand and foot upgrades clean out of the park. So articulation, where things get super dicey. Head is on a ball joint with a wide range of movement, both swivel and tilt-wise. Arms go out and can rotate 360 degrees. Doing so also tends to untab Motormaster's arms from his shoulders, which is super bothersome. Elbows also swivel from the waist rotation of the cars, and elbows can also bend past 90 degrees from the car's knees. Hands can rotate. Waist can swivel, but doing so requires you to lift the crotch plate and break up the general aesthetic of the figure. Thighs are positioned in such a way that outward movement and thigh swivel are non-existent. You can achieve outward movement by untapping the thigh plate, but doing so results in a super unstable gestalt. Therefore, movement in the thigh department is limited to forward movement, and good luck trying to get that to function properly. The rest of the articulation is created from the connection ports in the vehicles. These make some dynamic knees for both a bend and a swivel. Before I forget though, you can swivel around the vehicles for a more G1 look. Doing so sacrifices the knee movement, and well, since Motormaster isn't doing anything for Menasor, you may as well do this because Menasor is not getting any good poses in. He's great for standing and looking at him head on, and that's kinda where it ends. If you look at him from the side, the arms are placed a mile back from where the legs are situated, which makes him back heavy. So that was my way too long a review of Combiner Wars Menasor. About half an hour apparently. And I say too long because I really didn't like this thing, and I just kept going on and on about this thing. Compared to my Devastator review, which was actually a good figure, it only lasted 15 minutes. So, final thoughts. It feels like Hasbro really doesn't respect the Decepticons. The limbs of Menasor work fine. Plentiful articulation, and they look the part more or less. But Motormaster, literally the figure that holds this thing all together, is just so poorly mishandled. To the point where you can see the design influences they took from Optimus. You know, because they look so dang alike. Just because there was that one episode where Optimus put on camouflage paint and pretended to be Motormaster doesn't mean they're a dead ringer for each other, as Spike would say. And this transfers over to Menasor. The limbs work well enough, although the different car shapes really make this guy look deformed if you don't position him correctly. However, the design limitations of Motormaster really make a draw on what Menasor could have been. Especially when figures like the upcoming Protectobots, who essentially take the majority of these figures just with a new torso and make a way better looking Defensor. So, no, I don't agree with Optibotimus or any other reviewer that's been saying this. I can't recommend this figure just because it's affordable. It's $120 for a figure I can't stand looking at, and that's not even including the price of Blackjack. It's lanky, it's lumpy, it's poorly designed, has some of the dumbest weapons for its team members, feels hollow in some of the areas, has little to no articulation legs-wise, requires you to break up the aesthetic to get any waist or leg articulation, disproportionate arms, falls apart easily, is an eyesore in 2 out of 3 modes. If you dig this guy, then great, go hunt down the 6 figures and grab it. If you have the money, though, I strongly recommend the Fans Project set, even though it's a very complicated team of Transformers that requires a manual and probably a math tutor to get transformed, but it's honestly worth every penny. However, if you only have $120 to spend on a Gestalt, hunt Superion down. He's a way better figure overall. He doesn't need a 6th member to be complete, although Hasbro would leave you to believe otherwise. And come the fall, I'll tell you exactly why I can't love this Hasbro-based plain combiner enough. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow Reviewer signing off for the last time from High River, Alberta. Next up, back home to Vancouver Island.